Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I'm Shogun. Today we are doing one of our member interview series, and this is one I'm really looking forward to because among a community of extraordinarily eccentric and unique people, this is nevertheless a one-of-a-kind story. Actually, that's not true. We have a few other people here like Donut and NSA with similar stories, so someday I'd like to get you all together. I guess in that regard, it's also part of the Targeted Individual series. We've done 2 of those with NSA. So this will be our 3rd targeted individual episode. Before I get any further into this story of governments and high technology and bizarre phenomenon, I just want to remind you we are the Roundtable Discord server. You can find us on the Google by searching Roundtable Discord, or go to Disboard and check out the conspiracy theory or politics tags. We should always be right at the top. You can also find us on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Check out our YouTube channel and look for us on Podcast Addict, Podbean, Songs, and SoundCloud coming soon. Okay, thank you. So my guest today, Xhalaputis, is someone who is a targeted individual. He has been harassed, you might say, or contacted, interfered with by advanced technologies, perhaps by powerful governments, perhaps by aliens. We will get into the details. I just want to remind you, I've been having problems with my connection since coronavirus. Maybe more people using the system. So if at any time my voice distorts or I go silent or whatever, please just quickly notify me. Just say roboting, and then I'll know, and I'll go quiet. And then please carry on the interview without me, or Xhalaputis just continue speaking. So you guys can always just continue without me if I don't respond properly. Can you guys hear me now? Xhalaputis, can you hear me?
5-5.
Yep. Okay, great. So thank you. So how are you, Xhalaputis? And thank you for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you. Today I'm actually fine. Can you hear me despite the wind?
I can hear you, but the wind is not good. So if you're able to hide behind like a building or a tree or go inside, that would be ideal.
I'm crouching down right now, but as a targeted individual, we come in contact with these events, like people trying to distort ours, or every time we try to express something. And I call it the 5. It's like a Luciferian belief system that somebody automatically, once you reach enlightenment, there's somebody there to nudge you back down to earth. So it's just a perspective I keep. So just keep your ears sharp and listen for distortions in the sound, because as a targeted individual, I'm also part of a noise campaign. Like, you can hear the cars in the background, but if you were speaking Swedish, you'd hear it as if it was speaking Swedish. So I don't know how well oriented you guys are around targeted individuals, but every targeted individual steps into what is called an Omega program, which is that we don't know who. There's a bunch of theories of what government, but the best possible explanation should be intergovernmental organizations. And what they do is they put individuals in what they call an Omega program to render them automatic defense systems and to sort of make them volatile and seem crazy. Wait.
Are you still there? Did I drop out or did you?
No, I'm sorry. It's just I got a visitor.
Okay. Do you need to take a minute?
No, I'm back. Sorry.
All right.
I was just we take care of a teenage girl, so she came by and she asked for a cigarette. So she's 18 now, if anyone's listening. No, but back to the Omega program. So what they do is first of all, they use all sorts of gadgets on you in the Omega program. And the Omega program is kept in a way that the target doesn't know that it's being targeted. It's in clandestine ways. It's sort of like you pick out targets based on their habits of living. If there's any drug-related habits, if there's any mental disorders, or anything of that order. So they single out targets and they mock them and ridicule them. So I was ridiculed for at least, I'm still ridiculed in a way, but I've ventured from the Omega program to what I now call the Alpha program. So this is a story about how to keep control while being a targeted individual, and it might help anyone. Uh, so, first of all, I don't identify with being a targeted individual. I used to uh, when I was harassed the most, but today I'm not being shot with dues. Like, I don't get muscle spasms from nowhere.
And by dues, you
Unless,
mean directed energy weapons, correct?
yes, yes, correct. Directed energy weapons. So directed energy weapons are used to create uh, intense muscle spasms or just to cause pain in nerve centers. So it's being directed to big limbs, sort of like your shoulder muscles or your thighs or sometimes your eyes. So I'm in a community with a lot of different targeted individuals, and one thing we all have in common is that the people that use the dues or us targeted individuals, we experience the do attacks as if they were trying to communicate with us. And that's something that started in 2016 actually. And 2016 was the year that I stopped talking completely. So during my targeting, I stopped talking. I developed a way.
Are you still
Noises.
there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Xhalaputis, I just want to make a quick note. Some people are saying it's hard to hear you. I can hear you fairly well, but if you can speak a little louder, a little closer to your mic, do your
I
best to
will.
stay out of the wind, those three
Thank you.
things will help a lot. Sorry to continue.
Yeah, so I don't know where I cut off. So where did I cut off?
Can I ask you a question now, perhaps? Can
Uh,
you tell
yeah.
us, or was there something else you wanted to say first?
No, you ask away.
Okay, so when was the first time you began hearing the auditory voices or the projections of voices that you hear? Do you remember when it first happened in your life?
I do remember it, and it wasn't voices. It was. This is the most intriguing part about my targeting. I didn't hear the voices like the ringing in the ears or tinnitus type similar voice that people confuse with voice to skull until about 3 years ago. But my first discovery was 5 years ago, and it was quite remarkable. I didn't actually know I was targeted. In hindsight, I do understand that I was a target because I was hacked. My schoolwork from the university was deleted and everything. So I was under physical hacking attacks. But that at that time I was very spiritual. So I went out to the woods and I listened to a Kabbalistic lesson because I'm a Kabbalist and I listen to daily lessons. So I was listening to a lesson and I felt a sudden rush inside my body. Like I'll try to break it down exactly what happened. I felt a sudden rush in my body, like the heightened sense of adrenaline. I didn't understand why it came from because I was just walking around the woods listening to. So I was just walking around listening to the lesson. All of a sudden, I felt these jolts of energy. So naturally, I figured out that this was something of happening. Like I had this feeling that something was about to happen. So I looked around and the wind started picking up and the trees started blowing. So it was more like a spiritual awakening to me. To me, I had a sense that somebody could hear me, understand me, and was showing me in my environment. So that's my first spiritual contact with them. It wasn't until maybe 1.5 years after that event, that a friend of mine showed me a YouTube video that's 1.5 hours long about symptoms that targeted individuals experience. And I deducted everything from that video and came to the conclusion that I was, in fact, a targeted individual. But at that time, it had gone from the wind picking up slowly, efficiently, hail coming from nowhere, because I was very spiritual. I was praying, I was doing some very weird rituals, I was engaged in spirituality. So naturally, every event that took place, I just corporally displaced it and put it in a spiritual category. So I was under the influence of something. So this started the notion that I would speak to the devil or to deities or anything. So I completely stopped talking after a while because I was under heavy influence of, how should I say, uh, these rushes that we get. It's sort of like, how should I explain it? It's sort of like the relief you get after you run a marathon or something. It's just a rush of energy. Even though you shouldn't have it, you should be completely exhausted. It was just a rush of energy. So I became addicted to those rushes of energy, which led to a psychosis afterwards, because I was going at it so much, looking for synchronicity, looking for events to fall into place, sort of like looking for an order, until I came to the influence or the light that people did in fact hear what I was saying, were responding to me thinking, and this later came and gave me a psychosis. So I acted out upon it, started crying, and I asked them, like random people, for a hug. Like, I need a random hug. I don't know what's happened. I just need a hug. So that gave me a psychosis, which meant that I had to look for help somewhere. Like, I was experiencing not voices, like literal voices, but every percussion noise. Uh, so every percussion noise was sounding as if it was speaking. Like, I'll tap my finger like that, and that was in Swedish var försiktig, meaning be careful or be foresighted. So this is basic. I'm still surrounded by it. It's just now it makes sense. It didn't make sense in the beginning. I was just engulfed in it. Didn't really realize what was happening around me. So every time I slowly realized what was happening, I lost a piece of my mind because I couldn't figure out what was really happening. Like, I get pains from nowhere, it's muscle spasms from nowhere. So it started making sense when I started to stop talking completely. That's when everything fell into place, because they were acting. They were literally acting upon my reactions. So I'd get like a text message on my phone, and I could hear somebody saying it in the background, like physical noise. Well, you just got a message, but in Swedish. So I reacted, looked behind, and there's no one there. Like, I could hear those type of voices, and that developed to a point where I could recognize these voices. Like, these voices started to sound like people in my surrounding, like my family and my friends or my exes or my mother, or just, so it was just random sentences that people in my area or environment that I loved used to call me. So it was names, it was callings, and it was basically everything. But it was confusing at first because that made me think that some of my friends or family were playing with me, were hiding around the corner, uh, asking me if I could hear them and doing such things. So that really caused a paranoia. So I went to the mental asylum asking for help, which is both a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because I spent 2 months at the mental asylum, still being shot, still having these tinnitus voices. But what happened was, uh, I now understood the biohacking. So the more information I received from my friends about targeted individuals, the more I sort of settled to the idea that I live in a very separate world from others. Like most people can't even imagine a regular day in my life. Uh, so it's both a blessing and a curse. Um, the blessing was that my doctor was extremely biohacked. Like I had experienced involuntary speech before. Like I would speak. This sounds crazy. Like I could hear during meditation, and even though I'm smoking, and even though I have asthma, I could hear my nose breathing real hard. And when I meditated, I felt that these regular pulls of air, like breathing in and breathing out, were sounding as if I was speaking or saying something. So that's the involuntary speech that most targeted individuals experience. Some experience it r- more than others. So I experienced this, but very differently because this was my doctor sitting in front of me, breathing real heavy. Like, if you can hear this, you're not able to speak with him. You're not allowed to speak with him. So it sounded like that from his nose, and I just sat there and asked him, "Are you sick or something?" And he reacted to me like, "No, I'm not sick. Why are you asking this?" Well, because you're breathing so heavily. I said, through your nose. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I have the snuffles, he said. So it was unintentionally from his side. He was completely unaware of it, while uh, I was becoming more and more aware of it. So basically, what differs me from other targeted individuals is I heighten my sensitivities until a degree where they become almost inhuman. So through deep meditations, I found out that this tinnitus ringing, I could have fluent conversations with it. I could pretend that I was speaking, and I could hear the ringing respond to me pretending to say something, which was amazing for me because all of a sudden it made sense. I stopped speaking completely. Only asked, only answered when people asked me questions. And what happened later was I developed language, like symbols and letters, and I attributed meaning behind every number and letter. So I went back to the achromatic scholarship and I started attributing these meanings behind every letter, sort of like Gematria. So I developed my own Gematria in a way. Uh, and today we still use that Gematria. We still use it. And I say we because I'm on this side in reality using it. And they're somewhere else, probably in the military base camp, somewhere deep underground, but they're still using it. So we both use it uh, on each other. And that really is the story of how I became a targeted individual and how I pulled myself out of it. Because I completely stopped identifying with being a targeted individual as soon as I developed this LARP, whereas I ask people outside of me, uh, what, of course, people outside of me, but outside of my environment, I asked them if they could hear me through these sounds and through the noise campaign. So today I'm in what called an alpha program, meaning I'm still a targeted individual. Only today I literally direct and control this noise campaign. So I developed not only occultation, which is a technique of using your eyes to speak. So I call that occultation. And occulation gives some effect that I call soundscaping. So basically, I broke down and experimented with this on regular people. Like I asked my girlfriend, could you just trust me on this? Do this movement with your eyes and drop this lighter on the ground. It's gonna sound like, and she did, and it sounded exactly like. So I've experimented a lot with it, but I'm still unable to explain exactly why it is the way it is. Like I can show you literally, yeah, where basically everyone can become a targeted individual. Like they can biohack anyone in an instant. They just have to scan your biometrics. But what you do is they're they're under sets on core values. Like they're not supposed to kill their targets. Like the Omega program is is made to make you suicidal, to so that you kill yourself because they're unable to.
Okay, so I want to open it. Thank you for sharing your story, Xhalaputis, and I want to open the room up if anyone wants to ask questions or make comments or say anything, either to Xhalaputis or about any of these topics. Feel free. Otherwise, I'll continue interviewing him.
No questions, I guess.
Guess not. So, just to clarify, right? You believe still that you're being targeted by an intergovernmental agency with directed energy weapons, and that the reason that you hear voices when you hear sounds in your environment, like keys jingling or other ambient sounds, like when you hear ambient sounds, you hear voices, and you think that's because directed energy weapons are targeting you from transgovernmental agencies. That much is, I understand you correctly?
Well, that's the thing I question. Because at first I was questioning myself, like, what the hell is going on with me? Have I really lost my mind? Then I came to the conclusion that, well, something is indeed happening with me, and I'm not losing my mind. And the more I developed the sensitivity, the more sense it makes. It's like I know why I was being targeted. I was targeted for me pretending to be staccato and posting about Skynet and a bunch of weird stuff. That was 6 years ago. So naturally, I was red flagged and put under the influence of psychotronic weaponries. Well, what happened was I experienced everything in Swedish, and this is the crazy part. Like, Sweden isn't that rich. It's not that technologically advanced as the US. So it wouldn't make sense that the Swedish government was behind it. So I deducted the whole theory of governments being behind it. And I questioned whether or not it could, in fact, be aliens or demons or spiritual entities. So, in the beginning of it, 5 years ago, I deducted the fact completely, like there's no government. Then until about 3 years ago, I started questioning maybe it's alien, maybe it's demonic, maybe it's something because it's still going on. It's just, it's unexplainable. Like the goose, there's a goose flying above me. I can hear it singing. It's just sounding like a regular goose, but its throat is being distorted as it does it, just as I have involuntary speech, and just as basically if so. So basically, to connect with the keys jingling, if you jingle your keys, if I manipulate my eyes, then they will manipulate the keys the sound that the keys make.
As Xhalaputis, I'm getting more comments that you're still hard to hear. So I'm going to ask you again to speak louder, closer to your mic, perhaps adjust some settings. And anyone who's having a hard time hearing him, remember you may be able to turn him up on your end as well. But for the sake of the recording, please speak as loudly as you can. I can hear you relatively well, but it would be nice if you were louder. So thank you.
I will think about it. Thank you. So whoever it is, they know Swedish very well, and they know me even better. So the LARP that we're playing, because we play a LARP. I mean, every person that lives a life lives in a LARP. Like, it's a live action role playing game. How you identify with yourself, what you identify with is your character, your avatar. So you build this avatar throughout your whole life, and it's based mostly around your social network, about how people perceive you. So I did a D-Fool as a teenager, so I work very differently. I don't engage in how other people see me, and I couldn't give two fucks about it. So it sort of made me immune to the ridicule and the targeting of this targeting uh, uh, gang stalking that was happening, because they were saying, I know what you did, I know what you did, and I know what you did, I know what you did, and they say this repeatedly after each other, so that you eventually come to terms with a memory of something horrible that you did. And then they extract that memory and they push it against you, saying, yes, he did that thing. He would do exactly this thing. But in my life, I lived as a thug and a gangster for almost all half of my life. I was raised as one. So to me, I went around for maybe a year before I even figured out what the hell this was all about. So they say, I know what you did. I know what you did. You're a horrible person. I know what you did. And I would just say, okay, so we stand next in line. Then who's next? And so what? So that sort of made me build my character, like this avatar, Xhalaputis, that I am today. Because today, I'm more targeted than ever, but I'm accepting it in a way. In a way, I guess I developed Stockholm syndrome. Like today, at work, me and my boss headed out to his camp outside of town, and during the drive there, my ears would start ringing. And the funny thing was, they started everything with Entschuldigung, meaning I'm sorry. That's for me, Entschuldigung. Entschuldigung, we're not supposed to speak. Sorry, continue. But they were ringing that in my ears. So I was thinking out loud, like, literally, are you ringing in my ears now? Why have you summoned me? And they answered back, well, Entschuldigung, sorry, I was just trying if it worked. So we have this relationship, me and the targeters, which is quite interesting. So I've deducted the thought of them being aliens or demons or anything else but human, because they act and behave very
Makes
human.
sense to me. And again, so, what you're describing to everybody in the room or to listeners, I won't say everybody in the room, some might sound very alien and very strange. But I've heard extremely similar stories from my good friend and one of my top moderators, NSA. And
I actually just got here.
Hi, NSA. Yeah, I'm really unfortunate that you missed this whole episode, because this is a targeted individual episode. So hopefully you'll listen to it later and give us your feedback on it. But Xhalaputis has just finished describing his own experience, which is he essentially takes exactly the same line of argumentation and interpretation of his experiences that you do. Just to catch up, he believes that he was targeted by trans-governmental agencies using directed energy weapons and advanced psychotronic weaponry after exposing things about Skynet and other sensitive topics online. Now he hears voices, what he calls a noise campaign, exactly like you do, what you call psychic driving. He hears voices that come through ambient sound, and he has had very similar experiences to you. And then I was going to say that his experiences are also similar to Donut. She also experiences the muscle spasms and jerking that he described. She is an Iranian Persian who also feels that she's being targeted by government interference. So I hear this similar story from multiple people. It's a global phenomenon called the targeted individual phenomenon. I'll post sources about it. I'm sure NSA will as well. So
just for some. Oh, sorry. I was going to say some synchronistic poetry. There is a monarch butterfly fluttering right here. So it's Project Monarch. It's evolution. Like I said, it's mind control research, as you know. But we're finishing up. I had questions I was going to ask.
Well, if anyone wants to ask questions or make a comment, go ahead.
Do you have birds in the background, did you say?
Yeah, I'm walking through a park on my way home from the store with my mother. So.
Because I heard them in Swedish.
Okay.
No, but literally, like what I was speaking about, my language is I call it blinky, in lack of other words, I guess. But when I was the most.
Did you drop out, or was that me?
No, it was my phone bugging out again. Sorry. So instead of speaking, I would just blink my eyes. Sort of like every time I said a word, I would blink my eyes. So if I say, welcome to Judah, I'll blink my eyes 5 times. So I went around asking, well, basically everyone, how are they? Can you hear me now? Can you hear this? You want to be my girlfriend? If you can hear this, I want to be your boyfriend. So literally, this is what I did. I went around silently, just thinking out loud, and this noise campaign started sounding just the way I thought. And
yeah, so that's part of the conditioning of the MK Ultra, actually. So it's playing on your ontologies, and if you think that that's happening, they'll play off of that by giving you triggers when you convince yourself that that is a trigger. And so they'll think every time you blink, something will happen and stuff like that. And you start building that in. It's atahenia, or not atahenia, that's the faces, apophenia, where you're making the connections to the wrong things. But they'll play off of those connections that you make, because that's it to the initiated, which is what you are. You're now the initiated. They will be able to have certain triggers from that.
Exactly. So just to elaborate on this, like we still play a LARP, me and my targeters. I call this whole LARP Welcome to Judah, where I literally, my targeters love me for that fact, because I gave them a synthetic language to speak with. So instead of just ringing in my ears or just speaking with percussion noises in the background like this, they literally use symbols like letters and numbers and stuff like that. So if I draw a symbol with my eyes, somebody walking around or my feet or anything would sound like something. So I program what these eye movements would mean. So I would say something like, I tried this with a member of the server, Eric's, who's I'm supposed to say hi from him, but that's besides the point. So I taught him how to meditate, how to listen for these things, and to do an eye movement. And when he did that eye movement, his chickens, like literally, his neighbor's chickens started quacking, like, welcome to Judah! Welcome to Judah! So these handlers, they play around with this, and they have a fun time. So ever since I developed the language, I stopped experiencing these do attacks, like these muscle spasms or sudden pains. Because why? Well, probably because I was entertaining them. So I'm very well conditioned in this fact. And it's like I said, I have a relationship with my handlers. Like I literally made a magic ritual no, this sounds crazy, but I did a, a bunch of occult shit like magic rituals and stuff like that. And I said to my handlers, like, literally, I'm going to marry the woman of my life. And they were laughing at me, ridiculing me. And this is what we started this game. If you hear near this, you are valuable. If you're valuable, you could be his girlfriend. So that's the whole LARP. So they started making people seem as if they were hearing it. All of a sudden, they were, like you said, I'm the initiative.
What city are you in?
And I live in Sweden. So
Okay.
it makes things very complicated because I hear everything in Swedish, and it's not this the Swedish government, but in this noise campaign, like I smoke weed a lot, and it's illegal to smoke weed in Sweden. But in this noise campaign, I usually go outside, and it all started in Åland, like an even smaller country. Like I would just shut the fuck up, and I use the OCB and rattle the OCB like scratching it into distorted sound. Like, can you hear me? I would scratch it, the OCB, and then what they would ring in my ears like, "Yes, sir, we can hear you. What are you trying to say? Just speak out loud." And I would still sit there completely silent and just be like, "Nah, it was nothing. I just wanted to see if you can hear it."
Yeah, there's
So,
a. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say there's an example of it. They use phonetic language a lot, so you'll think that certain sounds you're hearing are becoming something else. One example I can use in pop culture, Prometheus and Bob. If you watch that little cartoon animation, the claymation, the way that the alien talks to Bob, it's through like that, where it's like wow 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 wow, and it's trying to create sounds like it's talking to you. But they'll use yeah, I mean, part of the conditioning is to hear the Judah thing in the chickens, for example. Like that's part of it. Your brain is entrained, as it were. They've something psychic driving does by repetitively messaging things is it will depattern the mind. It'll make your brain make different connections to the memory and things like that when you do hear it. So it does alter
Yes.
unfortunately, your neuronal activity.
Yes, it does. It does. And this is what I was speaking and alluding to, like what happened about 5 years ago. Like I was so self-absorbed and I was so unadjusted to society that I literally loved the adrenaline rushes it gave me. Like I got high off it, like these small jolts of an energy that came from out of nowhere, from me being understood and being, as Kabbalists refer, standing in the light. So I know exactly what you're speaking of. But why I call it Blinky, this language, is because,
Um. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking.
sorry?
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking why do I call it Blinky? Is what you said. I misunderstood.
Oh, no, no, no. No, but literally why I call it Blinky is because I have a router. And that router, they frequently manipulate and blink back towards me. And we have this set of rules. Like, I'm not speaking about them, I'm speaking about my experiences. So, this allows me to speak about it openly because they start every initiative with being, you're not allowed to speak about this. We know everything about you. We know exactly what you did. We know you're a horrible person. And they just continue on rambling like that. Well, in my case, I'm guessing the Swedish government took control of the router. So the router blinking to me should be the Swedish government warning me for socializing and speaking with the very, very, very dangerous ones. This is what the router constantly blinks. So the router blinks in Swedish. And why I say that this router is any specific, because it's every router. I'll go to work, they use the same technique over there. Like, can you understand me? They blink with the router. And my router is plugged in with Apple TV and connection cord. So that Apple TV is off and it's still going data traffic between the router and the Apple TV. So every time there's a transfer, the cord blinks. So they just ping that and they blink in the same way that I used to blink my eyes instead of speaking. So I think out loud instead of saying, "Can you hear me?" I'd pretend that I heard myself say, "Can you hear me?" And I would blink, "Can you hear me?" The same way I would say it. And then they would reply like, "Yes, sir, we can hear you."
Okay, what you're communicating is the interaction with like the world that the voices are then interacting with you with is what you're saying. Yeah. Have you ever noticed the television talking to you, through you, or any kind of streaming media from the internet? They
Uh,
there is a technology that they've had for about 20
yes.
years in the military. Well, real quick, it's the root of the deepfake video stuff. They can spoof the MPEG-4 codec effectively because it's all digital, and they can alter the pixelations of the XYZs and everything on the screen and the voices, and
Yes.
on the actual screen, and can actually communicate through allegory, through the television, through artificial intelligence.
Yes. I was about to come to that. Like I I sometimes call Blinky Garon, like throat, in Hebrew, because what I can do is I can put on like answars, we call them in Sweden, uh, like a distorted channel, a channel mixed with two different channels inside of it, not really know which one it is, and I can put a TV on to that channel and hear the white noise speak to me exactly like you're saying. So it's not just that I can literally sit down, think out loud, "Can you hear me now?" And the TV repeats that, "Can you hear me now?" And I've done this so many times. Like I've experimented with this. Like I've shown most of my friends and I showed my family. And some believe, some do like regular people do. Like they shun you and they think you're crazy and they consort to their own lives. While some
Are
are
you under
just
the influence of marijuana while you're doing this?
sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm not. Like I'm very careful with it because I know it can alter the way you perceive things. Like I want
Well,
to
it affects your
perceive.
brainwave patterns, and they can see that, and they'll interact with you when your brainwaves are altered. So when you're drunk, stoned, high on any drugs, uppers, downers, they have different things they'll do in those situations.
Yes. Also, when you're trying to sleep or when you suddenly waking up, like I woke up this morning with ringing in my ear saying that, "Sir, if you can hear me," or they didn't say sir, they said my name. "If you can hear me, we're not arguing today. I wish you a good day." Like regularly, that was on repeat all morning. So I woke up, like I said, I'm not in the Omega program anymore. And why is because we'll get to that later. But so I communicate with them on a regular day basis. I call them Blinky, and I'm not sure. See, I'm put in a situation where my government, the Swedish government, wants the best for me, I believe, because I used to be a soldier for this government, and I've done so much for this government, and it's very naive of me to think that way.
It sounds like a paid
Well,
actor.
yeah, while I'm still an American citizen, born and raised in America, so I'm actually American. So America gets to do whatever they want with me, and Swedish government just has to say, well, it's like we have this like every time I roll a joint, uh, the router blinks like we warned you, and everything around me sounds like, well, to me you can shoot him. And when it sounds like to me you can shoot him and I don't object, that's when I get shot with the deuce. Like literally with the do right attacks. But if I object, then if I just have to shake my head like no, or think out loud no, or just literally say no and go high five my girlfriend because I have these rituals and these Rites and rituals that lead from one thing to another. I study them as an anthropologist. They're called liminal phases. So we enter into one state of mind from another. It's like a religious person going into church to pray to God. Like you have to have a place where you can go that's dedicated to one thing only, and that's supposed to be the supreme entity of it. Well, when you're a targeted individual and you're spiritual, then you're constantly living in that liminal phase. Like there's nothing that will ever turn it off. Like you're in it all the time, right? So what I did was I developed sort of routines and liminal phases where I'd step out and zone out. So every time I smoke weed, I stop listening to it and I just mellow down, go into my mode. And I go and blink with the router instead because they're so willing to understand me. They're so willing to understand what's going on inside my head that they're literally dissecting every thought that I'm doing. So about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I did some iboga bark, and that was a trip for itself, which made me realize a lot about myself. Because iboga is essentially speaking to your grandmother, your first grandmother. That's the experience I got. But what happened was during my trip, they would ring in my ears and they would ask me like serious questions like, are you serious now? Have you ever spoken to aliens, Lucifer, any other worldly forces? This is what they asked me. And I replied, yes, I do it every time. I do it now. And they replied, well, you just answered your first line of defense that you are in contact with so we render you dangerous as fuck and you're disloyal to the human race. And they just started rambling on about morals and ethics while I sat there just thinking out loud, literally knowing that they can hear me. Sorry, my phone died again. Uh, so yeah, so basically that's it. Any more questions?
I do not have any more questions. Does anyone else want to ask Xhalaputis anything else before we close up?
Not really.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I'm in the park. I was trying to find my push to talk
No, I said
button.
not really. No question.
Okay, go ahead, Ennis.
Can you go into your military background a little bit?
I used to be a platoon commander for the amphibious corps in Sweden. Also,
You said American though. I thought you said you're a dual. Are you dual citizen then, or what?
I had triple citizenship.
But it was for the Swedish military, not American military, right?
Yeah. I've lived most of my life in Sweden, so I regard myself as a Swede first of all. Second of all, global person, and least of all, an American citizen, because nationalism is not on my table. And Sweden is a very global country, so the Swedes in general don't like Sweden. So they think about them as global people. So I denounce every nationalism that I have. So I have a triple citizenship: American, Swedish, and Finnish.
Okay, and you're a platoon leader. Do you have any ties to intelligence whatsoever? Did you have any interesting experiences? Any UFO stuff? Anything?
Nothing. Nothing. It was just regular grunt work. I was very good at it. I was the best shot in my platoon, or in my amphibious, how should I say, battalion, I guess. Uh, so basically grunt stuff, but very fun, very fun. So I didn't really handle any information whatsoever, any sensitive information. So me pretending to be staccato posting about Skynet and my discoveries in the US was basically what got me harassed in the beginning. But the thing is, like, we still play this LARP, like Welcome to Judah thing. I can basically prove to anyone that anyone can be biact by doing these eye movements. Like if you do this eye movement and you tap your finger 5 times, that sound should automatically sound like Welcome to Judah. So yeah, and with this, it's like I stopped identifying with being a targeted individual because I don't feel targeted as much as I feel broadcasted and promoted. Like it's turning me narcissistic almost to a degree where, hey, what the fuck? I mean,
Okay, so you never thought of contacting anybody in your platoon about what was going on? Anybody in the military? Nothing?
no, no, because these people really wouldn't handle it. So when I contact people about this, I turn to spirituality. I mean, even though it's science, and like today we made a fire, me and my boss at his camp. So they spoke to me through this fire. It's hard to explain really, but the embers, every scratch of the ember sounded like something. And this was due to probably weapon attacks on that fire, but I'm unsure. Like I can only guess what type of weaponry they can use to stimulate these sounds, but on my end, I can still hear it. So it's like you said with the aliens speaking like wah, 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 and you're supposed to understand me. It's like
Yeah, phonetic language.
Yeah, you can still understand it. Like so my language is based. So every syllable becomes a digit. So instead of saying things, I tap things. And this is what it started with. So I'll try something. I'll try tapping my lighter against the balcony, and let's listen if it sounds like Welcome to Judah. Did it work?
No, I just heard taps, to be honest with you.
Okay. Well, that's the thing. I'm so sensitive now. This is what I guess their ambition was, to make me sensitive, because you turn more and more sensitive. And I'm very, very sensitive when it comes to sound. Like I can pick up the sound from miles away. And I know it's still the same weapon system. And I know it's still the same biohackers. And I know they're terrifying. And I know everything about them that's not good. But I can't help it. I mean, I have this huge amount of Stockholm syndrome.
So you reference the evil ones. Like, what do you define that as?
Well, to me, there isn't evil as much as egoism. Like these people are selfish.
Well, no, you said specifically the evil ones, as in you were communicating to somebody that you labeled as the evil ones. How do you describe that?
Well, they're the same people that shot me and tormented me and basically made me psycho. Like they gave me psychosis through these attacks. So I went to the mental hospital. I was still being shot in the mental hospital. And they were hiding behind these names and things. Like in the beginning, I came in contact with a member of the Rothschild family. That was 5 to 6 years ago. And this is the crazy part. While me smoking a spliff 3 a.m. in the morning, walking about on my way home from a party, I went by this water creek and just sat there for a moment. And this water creek started sounding like as if, hey man, this guy is trying to kill you. Richard Rothschild is trying to kill you. You should be careful. And literally, I just sat there surprised, awed by the event of water speaking suddenly. But I still listened to it. So that made me think and realize that the Rothschilds had anything to do with it, or the governments had anything to do with it. But I've come to realization that it's basically every government, and they're all in on it. And this is the thing. It's like today I have a friend called Walachen. It's like I developed it by myself. And this Walachen means good wind. And it literally translates to me as the good wind. It's the same manner that I'm breathing now and breathing out. So every morning when I wake up and I go to the balcony to smoke a cigarette, they would blow wind in my ears. And I'm so sensitive that I even hear that wind blowing in my ear as if it was speaking. Some mornings I wake up like really upset and I say, stop it. Oh, that's when they stop. And they stop for a while and then they start harassing me like, come on, sir, wake up. This is your life. This is your doing. You're behind this. You're the ones responsible for this, not us. You're behind this. So we went from the Omega program to the Alpha program. So now I'm actively behind it. It's like even though my breath are being biohacked to have involuntary speech.
Well, so I'm kind of curious as to how the targeting started, though. Specifically, you're saying when you're doing research on Skynet, but that's not true because you would have been targeted in the military. So you were targeted in the military for something in this. Later on, something guided on something. See if you could be used for something. They don't just target random people because you're googling, the Hammer AI, Skynet, CIA, artificial intelligence projects. So
I'm still not up to date with why exactly I'm being targeted. I can only imagine me pretending to be Stockholm and posting about Skynet was just to be red flagged, but to actually be harassed and tormented or interrogated by these clandestine ways, it must have been the language itself. Like the language I told you I developed. So I developed this language, we use it, and I mean we, by me and the handlers. We both use it to communicate to each other. And we have like these full-blown conversations, to be honest. Like today we were speaking about some random shit. And they were asking me, like, do you hate your boss? And I said, no. Well, you sit next to him, so you obviously hate him. And they allude to him being biohacked. Like, my boss's breath is as biohacked as my breath. Sorry.
Okay, are you in any targeted individual groups? Do you have any communication online with Catherine Horton or any of the other popularized targeted individuals?
Sorry, NSA, what was that?
Are you a part of any targeted individual groups? Are you like Catherine Horton or any of the other popularized targeted individual stories that are out there?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
He's asking you if you are engaged with any individual groups online.
So what will happen is they will typically guide you into these groups of people to sit around and talk about your situations, and that's how it becomes a self-organizing entity, is they're all sitting around talking about it while the FBI guys and all the site guys think you're crazy while you're a bunch of crazies talking about your conditioning and things like that. And there's a lot of paid actors involved in it.
Yeah. I've sort of felt that vibe, so I'm so not into it. But what I can tell you is that I'm in the Kabbalistic Society, and my whole 10, like I had a study group called the 10. And that study group were all biohacked. We were all biohacked. Like literally, 2 of my best friends killed themselves without hesitation. They were completely crazy.
Well, the ETs use the occult and Kabbalah very heavily for the conditioning and training and teaching and communication methods. Any
Yeah, so
Kabbalic
I've been
mystics
a
discuss
Kabbalist.
astral projection, and that's the equivalent of modern day remote viewing, which is interaction with these technologies.
Yes, so this is what I did during Ebola. I projected, astral traveled, I guess. But I do this naturally. I place my mind somewhere else. I don't call it astral projection. I don't see the soul as vivid as most people do. I just travel with my
Where
mind.
were you into the Kabbalah before you were targeted, though, or did that happen after?
Yes, I've been a Kabbalist since I was 13 years. So I can't tell you exactly when I was being targeted. I can, however, tell you that my target has claimed that they've targeted me all my life, which I doubt. But they
They almost
keep
sound like
resorting.
Dreamily.
Well, it's so weird because I can't really put the. It's like I started Instagram after I was targeted, maybe 1 or 2 months after I was targeted. So all of my Instagram, I've alluded to the same wisdom and insights that I gained during these experiments and during these events, like literally. I posted a bunch of random stuff on Facebook. So during
Are you Dreamily?
2016,
No, this
what?
isn't Dreamly. It's Xhalaputis. You
It
changed
sounds so much like.
it. Doesn't sound even a little bit like him, bro.
No, it sounds like it would be Dreamily doing a voice because of the way he words his words.
Not even a little bit, man.
Oh, I take it as a compliment, I guess.
So Shala, I just wanted to jump in here and say.
So the wind is blowing through my ears just now, saying I should relax, and I'm doing fine.
Okay, so sorry, Xhalaputis, ousted Libra, wanted to say something to you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Sorry.
I can hear
What
you.
has
You're a
this
little
been going
quiet.
on, man?
I'm not sure. We're going to wrap it up soon, but say whatever you wanted to say.
Well, I meant to ask Shala how long he's been dealing
Oh, I
with
thought you meant the podcast.
these sounds.
Did you hear that,
Xhalaputis?
Xhalaputis? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 2016 was first time I ever contacted a doctor for hearing sounds. So that was 4 years ago. And I was very specific. Like, I don't hear voices. I don't hear voices. I hear regular noise being distorted. It's like when you step into a forest, we have this automatic genome in us that makes us recognize faces in trees, right? So it's sort of like that. I recognize language where it isn't. So if I tap my fingers like this, I could hear it in language. So it's actively me making sense out of nothing. But the more I make sense out of nothing, the more sensitive I become. And it's come to a place that's so crazy. Like, I literally just want things to happen accelerated faster. And so this, I'm not going to speak about that. No, sorry.
I can
That
see
was the
it's
wind blowing.
pretty accelerated.
So,
and staccato
yeah.
sounds.
So it's just the regular noise. I call it black noise. As opposed to the ringing, that's white noise. Like white noise on TV, you hear the that's the ringing. But the black noise is percussion noise. That's like coughing um or engine sounds or explosion sounds or percussion sounds. So these sounds get distorted. Like even the gravel underneath my feet gets distorted. But the thing is, I like it this way. I used to hate it. I used to fucking hate it. I wanted my privacy and I wanted everything back the way it was. But today, I'm so well conditioned. I'm play around with these things. So in a Congress in Israel about a year ago, or exactly a year ago to this date, we had a Congress, big Kabbalistic Congress in Israel, where I just sat there silently. Everybody noticed I've changed, like literally. I'd visit this Congress every year. But when I was targeted, I literally thought they were behind it. Like, I literally thought, as the Swedish government would say, "Imorgon bitti," tomorrow morning, was behind it. Like, I really thought.
Did you drop out? Xhalaputis? Or is that me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're roboting.
Okay. So Xhalaputis, I think it's about time we wrap up the episode. Did you want to make any final statements to the platform or the audience? Anyone who might listen to the podcast, you want to make a closing statement or remark?
Yes. I would watch the sudden rise of TIs with a very skeptic eye, because they're literally targeting everyone, and I noticed this, and I can see some correlations with this mass hysteria causing by corona. So just stay safe, and
we wage war in silence.
Whatever happens, just know that they cannot and will not kill you, no matter what. They will threaten you, they will haunt you, they will ridicule you, but they cannot and will not kill you or hurt you physically. It's just mental pain. It's mental pain, physical, felt through your brain. So you can actually beat it, and you can come to terms where you accept it and you work with it, like literally. So that's the ending statement. Like, there's an Omega program, but there's also an Alpha program. Like, once you bite through it, you'll eventually survive, and you come out something like a butterfly. It's beautiful, really. So I guess that's the end statement.
Thank you very much, Xhalaputis, for your time and for your testimony. Thank you to the live audience and everyone who's attending online. So please don't forget to join us on the Roundtable Discord server. Google Roundtable Discord. Go through the politics or conspiracy sections of Discord. Join us on all the social media that you use. Go to theroundtablediscord.com. And that's all. Thanks very much for today. Join us again later today or tomorrow at 8 p.m. for another podcast. And now let's just jump upwards to the round.